Welcome to the Wisepreneurs project, where wisdom meets entrepreneurship. I'm Nigel Rawlins, and I provide down-to-earth practical advice to help people over 50, most often women, navigate the shift to independent professional work. I focus on providing you with actionable insights and expert advice to optimize your life and work, from highlighting productivity, health, and cognitive agility to mastering business, marketing, and knowledge management. I want to help you survive, grow, and thrive as an independent professional. Welcome to another episode of Wisepreneurs, where I explore the journeys and insights of remarkable professionals shaping their fields. My guest, Karen Wickre, returns to the podcast after 50 episodes. She's a well-respected communicator, freelance editor, and networking expert with a wealth of experience in the tech industry as a journalist, and she ended up working for major organisations like Twitter and Google in their early years. She joins us to share her unique perspective and wisdom on cultivating meaningful connections, excelling in freelance work, and pursuing personal and professional growth. Karen discusses the importance of authentic networking, the unique opportunities and challenges of freelancing, and practical suggestions for maintaining your confidence and professionalism in a changing digital landscape. Welcome, Karen, to the 57th episode of the Wisepreneurs podcast. You were guest number 7.
Wow.
Karen, can you tell us where you're from and something about yourself?
Yes, Nigel, I'm glad to be here again. I'm Karen Wickre. I'm in San Francisco, which is today unusually hot for the city. We're often blessed with marine air and fog, and so it tends to not be ever as hot here as it does California. But sure enough, climate change also comes to us, and so we're having a hot spell. But anyway, it's a lovely day here. I've lived in San Francisco this year. It'll be 40 years. And 39 of those years, I've worked in the tech industry. And so I'm feeling these days, especially as things plunge ahead into a new world of AI, which I know we'll talk about, I feel like I'm watching a large panorama, a kind of long horizon of landscape of so many changes that have happened in really not even 40 years, I'd say 30 years, perhaps. But anyway, I'm feeling like I've seen it all, and I have seen a lot.
Fantastic. I love San Francisco. I've managed to visit there twice. Has it changed much in the 40 years, would you say?
Oh, yes, quite a bit, because when I moved here, it was a well-known tourist destination for sure, but it was a labor town. It was a working town in many ways, very strong unions, and a lot of port activity, for example, and that sort of thing. And the companies here then, banks, financial firms, some lumber, even strangely enough, lumber, especially from up north of here, and kind of food importers, that sort of thing. Very few of those are headquartered here anymore. Now there are still, Chevron is still our big gas company that's here. We have still quite large utility here. But in terms of the economy, it is much more driven by tech than it used to be, including a lot of tech companies in the city, but certainly in the region. So, yes, it has changed a lot in that time.
What I've noticed is I've heard things about Google having lots of employees there, and obviously a lot of the tech companies. That's driven up rents, and that's changed the nature of things. How's that affecting, do you think?
It's not so recent. I would say the tech companies were big 10 years ago, 15 years ago is when they got big. Apple, much older, much longer. But I think that second generation that included Google, Facebook in particular, had many thousands of employees. Not all of them worked by headquarters. And if they were younger, they tended they were based here, they tended to want to be in the city. So it is true that the demand for housing at San Francisco has not had enough housing for many years, did drive up rents for sure, as often happens in an area that's in demand. I'm not defending the lack of housing by any means. It's ridiculous that I thought about this earlier. But that's one reason among many. San Francisco has been a destination for many people from different fields for a long time, but definitely having an employee base that wants to be in the city and a shortage of rentable apartments and places where there's no rent controls. So the landlords try to get what they can get.
The problem in Australia, there's just not enough rental properties, and people are getting a little bit angry about bringing in migrants when there's not enough properties for Australians. And
Yes.
I was hearing one very famous American news commentator who's gone out from Fox, and he was saying you should look after your own country people first, make sure they're well off so they can have children and be happy so they can have children. You don't have to bring in all these other people because it's really, in Australia, it's pretty tough now to find anywhere. And rents have gone up to ridiculous amounts.
Yep.
My wife and I are very lucky. We own our own property and we're both retired, you could say, even though I'm
semi-retired,
semi-retired, yeah. And I will talk to you about that as well. Since COVID, we've seen a lot more remote work. So we were just talking about rentals being very expensive. Obviously, with technology today, you can work hybrid or work remote. And in terms of networking, are you seeing how that's working out in the tech world?
Yes, I think if there was any positive that came out of COVID, and I realize that's an odd thing to even think about, Zoom came along, obviously, but other platforms too. So we're now much more used to the idea of video conversations. And it maybe in a way it's easier now because it's not required in every instance of work the way it was for quite a time. What's wonderful about that is that we see that it's easier to connect with people regardless of time zone. And I know we're managing to do that here today and tomorrow in our two time zones. But the idea that you can have a personal conversation, a private conversation, confidential with somebody over video or even just audio or, dare I say, phone, is much more a familiar concept now than the idea that we have to be in person to have a connection. I think the quality is so good, the technology is so good that we can, I'm not saying it should be 100% virtual, but it's much easier to connect with people. And the reason for not is not about we can't get together in person. So that actually, I think, has been a big help.
I find it amazing. I have podcast guests from many different countries, and we had a glitch with my calendar, which I've now fixed now, and it works, which is really good. And that works out the time zones for us because I had no idea about 20 different time zones.
None of us do. Yeah.
America's got several. And even Canada's got 3 or 4. I struggle with that, but now we've got the technology that will do that. So in terms of, I'll be honest, I've been running a marketing services company for 20 years. I rarely see any of my clients. Occasionally I'll have a Zoom meeting with them, but most of the time it's email. So in terms of networking, how should you try and keep connected? And I might even think about you. How many connections have you got? So it'd be a full-time job keeping connected, wouldn't it?
Only if I were to go down a list every day and try and hit everybody up, which I don't do. I don't recommend that. In terms of, I'd make a distinction here between people we already know, for whom it's probably easier to arrange a video call and be more personable about it. I will say that one nice thing about video is that we got used to perhaps a pet in the background or a baby or the mailman comes or things happen that they're a little bit social lubricants for people, which I think is quite nice. It's not just, it's hard to have a strictly business only agenda limited conversation, even if that's the goal of the call. It's nice to have a little bit of surrounding around that as we're seeing here. So I would say it's easier to arrange and have video chats with people you already know. You don't have to know them well. They don't have to be your friends. But if you've been introduced, I think the polite thing is to say you'd be open to a video call. And interestingly, friends of mine who work in hybrid roles for companies full time, sometimes they will say, do you mind if it's just audio? Because I can't take another video call because they're doing it back to back all day. I'm not doing that. I hope you're not doing that.
No.
And yeah, it's understandable. People you don't know, I would assume that's the initial contact. Email is always I'd be an imperative, I think, default for the introduction, for the here's looking for, here's my question. You can just set that up in email, which doesn't demand a exchange, right? That gives somebody an idea of how they want. I'm too busy for 2 weeks, and then I have time for this. It just is easier for someone you know or just being introduced to. But for others, and for catching up and for reestablishing contact, people you already know, I think to say, do you mind if it's video, is a polite thing. And many people will say, no, that'd be fine.
That's an interesting thing, because I've just realized that I do make a lot of connections to people I find interesting on LinkedIn. And sometimes they want to connect with me, and then sometimes they want to get onto a video with me straight away. And I'm going, oh, are they trying to sell me something? That's a bit of a concern, and it puts me off. Whereas I would like to talk to them, but not on a sales call.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's interesting.
Exactly. And not with when you don't know someone. I find on LinkedIn it has many benefits, and I'm a fan of it. But one thing is when people are essentially cold calling you. Cold contacting you, and they do want to sell you some service or another. And it is easy enough, and I've always had good luck with this, simply saying, no, not interested, or ignoring them.
Yep.
And that's the end of it. Occasionally, I will say, because some of them are really cold calls, someone will, it's happened more than once, will say, could I, based on your profile, could we talk to you about your software development team? And I write back and I say, no, you haven't looked at my profile. Yeah. The word software is not in it. The word development is not in it. I'm a solo consultant in editorial. It has nothing to do with software development. So please read. I occasionally will say this, just read the profiles more carefully.
And that's the interesting thing. This is all about communication. And you go back to being a journalist, and that tech journalist, believe it or not, one of the early ones, and female at that stage too. And then you've worked for Google, you've worked for Twitter, but now the communication is video. And as we have things behind us, like I've got a plant coming out of my head, so I'm going to have to move that. But we have our pictures, and we see into people's houses. And as you mentioned before, there's all sorts of things going on in their house. The doorbell might ring. Hopefully no one's going to clump past outside my door in a moment because my wife's grandchild's here. So hopefully I think I've warned him to be quiet.
Things happen. Things happen in life.
So in terms of this, how do you think we talk to people on our video communications has changed? Because I get to send to a lot of places because I've done more than 50 podcast interviews now. And even though it's audio, I still get to see their backgrounds, and some of them are quite interesting. Some of them are just, wow, you're in a cupboard.
Yeah. And some, I would imagine, they picked a designed background. So you're not seeing in, right? Yeah. Which I see that more with people at work, wherever they work, that they're at home maybe, but they've got whatever they've got in the background to hide the personal. But you and I are beyond caring, say.
Oh, we don't show the video anyways. It's purely audio, which is really good. Okay. You're not so happy with Twitter anymore?
No, sadly. So I should say I quit working there. I left Twitter, the company, in 2016. That was after almost 5 years there. And a tumultuous time then, but nothing like the last year plus has been. Almost 2 years, isn't it? This fall, maybe. So I feel I loved Twitter, as imperfect as the product was. I loved it for a long time. It was a wonderful publishing platform because it was real time, because it was open and essentially not just asynchronous in terms of time, but asymmetrical in terms of who you follow and who follows you, right? It didn't have to have mutuality. And so that meant you could follow politicians and celebrities and whatnot. But also, some people really shined at Twitter. Interesting conversations, comedians trying out material. And then the value of real time in the case of a suddenly emerging event, whether it's a natural disaster, whether it's a protest or a riot or just unexpected news, basically. There's nothing like old Twitter. And I loved it for all those reasons. I love clever people that were on it. I love just lots of things about it. But I don't love it anymore. And I feel that the new owner has ruined a lot of things about it. What's ironic to me is Twitter was always widely misunderstood. And because it went public in the same time frame as Facebook, Wall Street and pundits and analysts were always comparing the two services, and they really are not at all the same service. Unfortunately, people understand that to Twitter's detriment. And so there is not another service like there was. Nothing has come in to replace it. I don't think anything will. Other things approximate parts of its features, but a lot of the people that I followed on Twitter have gone. And so I look at it, I would say, I what I did in my case, I did not want the new company taking over my handle, which I had for 15 years. I had 16 or 17,000 followers. Not that they were all looking at what I said. I understand that. But anyway, it felt like a home. So I pinned at the top of my Twitter feed, I think sometime last year, I'm not here anymore. Here are all the places where I have accounts. You can find me there. So I do look at Twitter occasionally just to see kind of what's the zeitgeist, but there's less of it. There's certainly individual people that and accounts that for there, and then I look to see have they gone somewhere else? And some have and some haven't. In the world of real time, in the world of journalism, it's hard to replace Twitter because at least it still has that quality. Yep. Probably he would drive everybody away if it didn't have that aspect anymore. Yep. If there was some kind of time delay or something, then it would be like all the others.
Yeah, I'm still getting my head around the changes. What I think was interesting was how many people he got rid of, and it still runs. And I think that's an interesting lesson from a business is, do you need that many people? Even though it's sad that a lot of people lost their jobs.
Yes, it does still function. I would say, though, on the money-making side, there's no sales team to speak of anymore. There's Linda Yaccarino, and good luck to her. But there were actually people selling not just individual ads, but a lot of ongoing activations and accounts. And by the way, there was a whole trust and safety team that is gone. Mm-hmm. And so there's no reliable quality control. And the vacuum of respected and known advertisers, they're now a lot more unsavory advertisers. Yep. It's interesting now, you cannot unfollow or complain about an ad unless you're paying $8.
Yes. And that's American. So, Whereas in Australia, $8 a month's like $14 or $15 or even more. That's one of the issues that I have. It's so expensive to get that blue tick. Yeah. And I've got subscriptions to a number of places, and it just gets to a point where I've got too many subscriptions and regular payments.
Yes, same.
Yeah, my big issue is I do follow a lot of people because I'm very interested in authors and people who are experts in a particular area, but finding them is very difficult. Yes.
I agree.
There is a program, I think it's called Black Magic or something, that you can pay for, and then you can follow so many people and it'll show if they've got something and you can track them. But in the old days, you used to have all these other programs that you could actually follow particular people in your lists.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. I looked the other night after the presidential debate just to see, and there certainly were some political pundits and opinionators right away. But I could also find that elsewhere. And it just wasn't as compelling because I know the numbers have. And the fact of the idea that if you simply pay, you're verified, takes away, as imperfect as the old Twitter verification system was, and believe me, it was imperfect. The idea that anybody can pay to be, quote, verified it just goes against, it makes it a lot less useful.
Yes, there's a trust factor in there, but whether they're trustworthy. somebody told me the other day just to avoid Twitter until the presidential election's over. He said there's just going to be so much stuff flying around. But I mentioned before
I
when we
think
were
that's
talking,
right.
I mentioned that my politics has changed a little bit since I've been looking at Twitter because I'm beginning to see things and I'm going, oh, I used to think that and now I'm seeing this. And I think what it does, it can expose issues. And then maybe because I'm older anyway, but it shows up people doing something. Now, you've got to be very careful because if you're only getting a snippet, you're probably not getting the whole context. But it can draw
Right.
attention to things that we thought were right. For example, COVID. Should we have been locked down during COVID? I now believe we shouldn't have, but we didn't know at the time. So we were all frightened and so we were happy and take the injections. And now we're seeing a lot of stuff coming through. It wasn't safe for you and people are dying and you go, oh, it really forces you to evaluate a bit more. Now, not everyone does. They just believe it.
If you're thoughtful about it and you look at the sources behind
Yes.
whatever the posts are, I agree that you can learn a lot.
Yeah. And that's how I use it. Let's go back to LinkedIn, which is probably a big home for you now, isn't it?
I have been on LinkedIn many years, and I have to say it has, I think it benefited from COVID and it benefited from the loss or the changes at Twitter as well.
Yeah. One of the things I have, going back to Twitter and then also the same issue with LinkedIn is posting. One of the things I struggle with Twitter is people are just posting stuff. It's just post. And it's not necessarily useful. It's just an opinion or it's almost automatic in some places.
Yes.
I'm finding it the same on LinkedIn and there's obviously little templates for putting your posts together. Make a hook and then make it this and then make them click so you scroll down and make them stay there. And I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, oh, that's pretty boring or it's not relevant. And that's the other big danger is that there's a massive information just flowing all the time that, again,
from everywhere, from every source. Yeah.
And then you've also got people on Twitter and on LinkedIn selling, and I've interviewed quite a few people and taught me a lot about LinkedIn that I didn't know. There's people selling courses and we're getting more and more people putting stuff out. And if everyone's putting 6 or 7 things out a day, where do you look? So what do you think's happening?
Too much. I do think LinkedIn, as I say, benefited partly from COVID in that it was another way to connect with people when everybody was not going to offices, maybe looking for jobs and maybe relocating, that sort of normal professional range of things. But they do have, I don't know if you know this, they have a large editorial team at LinkedIn, about 60 people. They have podcasts. They write their own post material about a variety of things, and they boost people's that are, they tend to be professional focus. It's not about everything in the world. And to their credit, I would say they've stuck with that, which may make it seem more boring, but they're not everything to everyone. But it is a de facto kind of directory of people who are in a sort of professional world, I would say. I know for me, when someone says to me, do you know so-and-so? I immediately go to look LinkedIn, see who they are, how I'm connected, that sort of thing. That's probably not true in every place in the world, but it is true, I think, in a fair portion of what we would call white-collar jobs, professional jobs. So it does have that value. But yes, that also means I think more people are on there to sell or to connect. I've always, for a long time, I have just a whole queue of people I've never responded to who say, you have an interesting profile. I think we should connect. Like, why? What? Yeah.
No, I'm seeing it too. I've got 3 sitting in there at the moment and they're all developers from a certain country. And I'm going, oh, they're going to ask me if I want some web work done or SEO work done. And I'm thinking, yeah, I subcontract. I use freelancers myself and I really have to trust them and I have to run them through. I've got to spend several $100s before I really know if they're any good. And so I really don't want to respond to some of them. I have, and then I get that email and I'm going, oh no. So now I'm getting that list and that's going to be annoying. So it'd be nice if they had a little button. Oh no, they do. You can say, I don't know this person.
They do.
Yeah.
Yes, you can, and you can say, I don't know, and you can also say, ignore the message.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are. Yeah.
No, it was interesting. That's where I find most of my guests on LinkedIn. So when I connect with them, I explain that I have read their book, or I've read several articles, or one of their articles I found really good, and explain which article it was. Or in the case of a philosopher, I think she lives in Holland, the Netherlands. I don't know what we call it anymore. It used to be Holland, wasn't it, when we were kids? And she runs Love and Philosophy. It's a podcast. It's brilliant. And she's quite brilliant. So I've connected with her and I wanted to talk to her, but I'm not game yet to have her on the podcast because she's really deep into the philosophy. And I can get my head around some of these subjects, but I really need to reflect and think and read. I've read your book. I've read your book twice now.
Oh,
and I think that's how I reached out. No, I got the Kindle version and I bought the physical one, and I can't find where I put the physical one. I've got too many books now. But I will always buy the books, or I'll have read their articles, or I will listen to their podcast things.
Yes.
But anyway, one of my guests was Hazel Edwards, who wrote a picture story book 40 years ago called There's a Hippopotamus Eating Cake on My Roof. And a friend of mine introduced me to her, so I interviewed her on the podcast, and she's written over 220 books. And she's still going. So I went up to an event in Melbourne where she was presenting her new book, which she called Authorpreneurship. And one lady came up to me and said, "Oh, I was a guest on your podcast," and I didn't recognize her at all.
Oh, wow.
And that's the danger is, you can see the face, but
yes.
In reality, it's somebody else. But she told me a really interesting thing about LinkedIn. There's a little bell on the profile, and if you press that bell, it'll always tell you in your feed whether they've written something. And I didn't know that, and I didn't see it.
Oh, I didn't know that either. Yeah, I did not know that either. Yeah.
So that'll come up in your notifications. So the ones I really want to follow now, I can, but I'm going to have a big notification list. I'm keen to anyone I've interviewed to go in and if they put something up, support them, which is, how you get some traction.
Yeah.
So where we go?
I have to say this about LinkedIn. Because they do have a following. I've been I don't know what it is, 500 million people around the world, like that. And a few years ago, I think before my book came out, I was working on my book. Someone from LinkedIn editorial reached out to me, and they'd seen an article I'd written that was called Build a Mighty Network for Life or something like that. And they said, could you essentially rewrite that for us? I'd written it for another publication. And I knew this wasn't a paid job at all, but that was fine. I was able to rewrite it. I posted it. They promoted it. And within 3 days, this was just a post, right? For 3 days, that thing had 100,000 views.
Wow.
And so that's the power of LinkedIn when there's a juggernaut going or when you have following. I didn't have that big a following, so it was really their promotion that did that. But I would say on a smaller scale, something more interesting recently, a friend of mine, I've done a couple of LinkedIn Live sessions because that's become a part of LinkedIn now, is to have these kind of webinars that are live, right? And conversations. It's essentially a Zoom call, but called LinkedIn Live, and it's through LinkedIn. And so one of the hosts I was on with, it was a Q&A, she said, you should post something every week on LinkedIn. And I'm not really writing anything long form.
Yes.
And she said it would be. She goaded me into it with the hashtag Wickre Wednesday.
Yes.
And so I have been following that.
Yes.
And so I have been posting not a few paragraphs. Yesterday was one paragraph, and people do respond. There's a bit of a readership there, and people say, oh, I like what you're posting. So again, I guess it goes to the power of LinkedIn.
You mentioned about you introduced somebody to somebody and you didn't hear back how it went. And it's a little bit about etiquette, really, in a sense.
Yes. Yeah.
I read that one.
Yeah,
What's the other
that's
one?
right.
I did read you one about the hot weather.
Yes.
So how long's that been going on? We create Wednesdays.
Oh, maybe 6 weeks. Not very. But I'm going to try. I'm going to try and keep it up.
It's good to hear your reflections on things because it's your point of view. If I was to do mine, oh golly, what have I read that particular week? I've got so sick and tired of reading. I basically read nonfiction.
No, me too. But sometimes it's just what happened to you or what's your reflection on a small experience you had.
Yep. Yeah, no, I probably should put some of those things in because something happens every day. One of the interesting things nowadays, and I'll probably mention it on the podcast, I rarely leave the home apart from going for a walk or going to the supermarket. Now, I live in a small country town. Most of my life is online, doing online training, which I learn stuff, or reading books. My wife goes out into the world a lot more than I do. I rarely go to Melbourne anymore. And if I do, I take a bus and a train because I really don't want to drive anywhere. But I rarely go anywhere nowadays. So my life is the social media feeds that I'm getting in, my podcast interviews, which I can have 2 or 3 a week, actually, which is really amazing. And to connect with people in Sweden, Spain, Belgium. I am talking to the most amazing people in the Czech Republic. 3 now.
Oh, wow.
I never met such an intelligent group of people who are really doing big things in the world. And they've come through a communist era, and it has done something to them. It's made them really sharp, intelligent, insightful. Is that the right word? Insightful. And they're writing interesting books. So I'm pretty excited to talk to another one coming up soon who talks all about knowledge management and personal knowledge management. And I find it difficult to find people to talk about some of the topics I want to talk about. And that's the danger of me reading so much. Even though I've run a marketing company, I rarely read about marketing or business because I find them boring books. There's a lot just telling, do this.
Often.
And that's what I'm finding on LinkedIn. Do this.
Yes.
And the ones who are teaching you, some of the ones, there's people who are telling you how to write posts. What happens if 1,000 people write the same type of framework? I don't want to follow them anymore.
They won't. Though 1,000 people will read that, they won't follow the advice and do it. Yeah.
So that's what I'm finding. So what do you think the best practice is for being on LinkedIn? To get a following, you obviously have to post regularly.
Yes. But not everybody is there for a following. Yes. It's the same on any platform. Frequency helps you go wider. More people see what you do. If it's regular and it's interesting in whatever way, it's clever in whatever way, people will notice. But it's a long game, whatever the platform is. The days of ginning up your numbers to get more followers, that's ancient times now. So I think for most people, the important thing about LinkedIn, they may get interesting ideas, read something that they hadn't thought about and learn from it and that sort of thing. Or they may post and have something to say. All of that is fine. I think what's important for people who are there is to be sure that their profiles are fairly current and descriptive. And it's not just about getting a job. It's also about remembering that because it is a lookup directory for so many, people are looking for speakers, subject matter experts, board members, volunteers, people who could write commentary about something. It's much more than just for your job.
Yes.
And I remind people of this who have been at a kind of stable job for a long time, and they think, they have very little on their LinkedIn. But I say, but you could be on a panel or at a workshop conference or something like that. And by the way, no job is too stable anymore.
Yes.
You want to, I would say, at least quarterly date your chronology. And even if you're in the same job, but maybe you have a new title, maybe you have done a new project, maybe you've got some new volunteer work or certification or something like that. But that open block at the top, this sort of blank field, it's about you. That's always really important. And I have said this to many people. If you want a hint that you might be looking for a job, or if you want to say up there, I'm open, I'm pursuing new opportunities, or I'm passionate about subject X, that could signify to people, even if you're not formally and officially for a job. There are lots of ways to do it. It's that open field where you don't want to repeat your job chronology that we see below anyway. You want to have something there. In all the different things I've done, like, this is the driving force. This is the passion. This is the thing that I'm really interested in. And now I'm looking at something adjacent to it and asking questions about this, that, or the other thing. It gives people a sense of, oh, they're interesting, they're current, they're going in a new direction that I hadn't thought about. Something like that.
Maybe we should start talking about AI, because I use it. It's been out now 2 or 3 years, and I'd like to find out if you're using it. But with LinkedIn, I often buy some prompts to use for images because I'm not very good at prompting.
Yes.
But I noticed there was a huge amount of ones you could use for LinkedIn. You can have a LinkedIn social media manager, which will tell you what to do. And then a whole range of prompts that'll write all of these instructions for you. And I'm thinking, the thing I'm hearing is we should write with our own voice. But if you use AI, it's going to be fairly mechanical. And I would suggest probably an awful lot of posts on LinkedIn are now AI driven. I've got to put one out today, a little article on my podcast guest who's going out. But I use AI to help me draft it, but then I've got to spend about 2 hours cleaning up to say what I really wanted to say. What's your experience with AI so far?
I have to say I'm probably using it less than you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading all about it. I've subscribed to way too many AI newsletters to even keep up with.
Yes.
So I'm paying attention to the companies and what capabilities are. And there are some valuable uses for sure. You're suggesting around outlining something, a first draft of something.
Yep.
Fantastic, I think. All of those things can be useful, especially if someone is just in a muddle about what to say or trying to summarize some long, like a transcript or something like that. Fantastic. But I'm a longtime editor, so I would never just let go whatever the machine spits out. Never. And so I would always then say, okay, I get the gist, or I see that the important thing is at the top and then the second most important. So, but then I'm going to rewrite it just as you're saying.
Yeah. Oh, golly. Without doing that, I got it to look at the transcript of our last talk and describe you. And it called, this is a word that drives me nuts when I see seasoned editor. I keep thinking salt and pepper.
That's funny. So I like seasoned because it's not saying old.
Yes, I know. That's
seasoned.
different.
Seasoned is one. Veteran is another.
Yes.
Veteran is another one you might use.
One of the other uses of AI is how to do something, how to connect something, how to solve a technical issue.
Yes.
So it does all that as well. What's the best way, or what's a program that will be better to use than this? Or I had to check my calendar the other day when we had trouble. I said, because I made several bookings through the same calendar that you used and we had problems with. So I had to use AI to double check the times and check with the people, was this calendar working properly? And it was. And then I contacted the company that SavvyCal, which I'm now using. I said, look, Karen found this. What's going on? And they told me how to fix that.
Nice.
But AI also helps me figure out things like that. So the benefit is instead of the old way of, say, doing a Google search and then looking through and figuring out, you can say to AI, can you just tell me what the time zone is there if it's here in Australia? Bang, you get an answer. Or can you turn this into lowercase? Or can you format this for me? Or tell me how to format this on Word doc or something like that. I think it's a handy little tool.
And not so little, and already not so little, just in terms of the size of how much has popped up the last, right? It's just astonishing. It's the biggest sort of tech change I've seen in all my years.
I think it's getting better and better, but I think the way to look at it is a prediction machine, and that's the sort of thing you're going to get, and it predicts what you're after. So if you put a simple prompt in, you're going to get a fairly simple response that some might think is okay.
Right.
But it is where we have to learn, where good communicators have to learn to prompt it in such a way that you get a better output or a more useful output, not just an output. So I think that's going to be very interesting. All right, what I'd like to go on to is, because we're older and we're more mature and we don't always know how to describe ourselves, and I have a problem. Like I say, look, I work with over 50s, but really most of my clients are over 60, but I do have a whole lot of younger female clients. I generally work with women. So what I wanted to talk about is, because we're older, how do you structure your day? How do you structure your week? How much time do you spend working?
Really depends for me on who's in need and who's paying, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both things. And so I've had busy times where there are deadlines. I do a lot of writing and editing.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes there are deadlines for a company's announcement or a kind of opinion commentary that somebody now is going to pitch to certain news outlets or something like that. That's what drives the busyness. But most of my time is not filled with deadlines because I don't have a lot of clients at any one time who need something typically. So really the day is more, I'm always up early. I'm an old workhorse in that way. So I'm always looking at my email and seeing what's come in overnight and reading some of the 1,000 newsletters that I get, plus the socials in the morning. I'm always doing that. But like right now, I'm helping a journalist doing research for him on a book he's writing.
Mm-hmm.
So the pace is slower, but there are times that the particular thing he's writing about that I need to look into for now, because that's going to be useful to him as he's writing, as opposed to things that I know are coming up. So I would say, I'm not even sure I track it so much by hours. Part of every day typically goes to some kind of somebody else's project that I'm doing. Part of the day is for me having to do with mentoring and making introductions to people, because I'm called on that. And then a part of the day is hitting all the New York Times word puzzles, because there are now quite a few of them to get through every day. I'm very religious about that. Doing other things and having a fairly new dog. I just recently adopted a new rescue dog. There's some walks involved too.
Oh, that's fabulous. So it's a more relaxed week. I call myself semi-retired, but I probably spend 50, 60 hours a week. But it's not just on the computer. It's also reading and trying to write and doing the podcast.
Yes, that's right.
We have a choice about what we do.
Yes. To me, in some cases, I have longstanding clients, as you do. And so when they call, I'm going to jump in with them because we're familiar with each other. And that's part of why they have me, is because we don't have to go through a lot of preliminary to get to whatever it is they need. And sometimes it's that it's not really a choice then. I'm going to help them because they've called. And then in terms of something like this book project, I knew the guy who was developing his proposal for an agent. And when he told me about it, I said, if you're successful getting a contract, I'd like to help you with this book because I'm very interested in the topic. I know a lot about the topic. I can comment what you're looking into. And he said, I would like someone who's like a thought partner. And I said, honestly, I am that person.
Yes.
And so that's how I said, this is interesting. Somebody else's book might have come along and I would have said, and I have said, I'm not the right one for that.
Yes.
Because there are just times that I just know it's not going to be that interesting, or maybe the setup is too complicated or something. But yes, we get to choose.
I think that's the secret of being a knowledge worker or somebody who uses their knowledge later in life, post-work, is to choose the things you want to do and develop the lifestyle you want to do. But San Francisco is a fabulous city anyway, so going for walks there is wonderful. I used to love going down to, was it the harbour down there? That was just beautiful.
Oh, at Embarcadero?
Oh, yes. That's just lovely. And they've got a lovely market in there. I went in there one time. They had a mushroom seller there. I couldn't believe how many mushrooms there were. Is he still there?
Yes, still there.
I'd probably be eating a lot more mushrooms if we had a mushroom market like that. I have to travel 100 kilometres to Melbourne to get to a decent market, unfortunately. And they're all getting a lot more commercial now, not as interesting. And
yes,
prices have gone up too, so they're not as good. But I think America is a better place for food, or good food if you want to search it out. And they deliver it too.
It's true. In California, at least, the good food is local. Much
Mm.
good food is local.
Mm.
And lots of places they deliver it. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, you can get really good meat delivered. Talking about jobs yesterday, I had a phone call that was pretty vague, and I thought, I said somebody wants a website or something. I'm thinking, do I really want to do another website? It was actually my butcher ringing me and saying that he had my delivery that I had to go and pick up, and I thought, that was such a relief.
Yes.
And the whole point I'm trying to make there is that we really do need to choose the work we want. I do medical websites as well, and I do a lot of their writing for them, believe it or not, on fertility and infertility and a range of other. For some reason, I'm able to write this stuff. Don't ask me why.
Good for you. Yeah.
But I also can write about horse chiropractic.
Yeah, that's the beauty of being a writer, is that you can do reading and research, and barring the most technical, perhaps, you can get the gist and come up with something that also makes sense to the non-expert.
Oh, that's what I like to do. But I also, if I'm writing one of those technical ones, I also find a subcontractor or an editor who can put their eye through. And believe it or not, there's a lot of retired medical specialists out there who are on the freelance platforms. And so when I wrote the fertility ones, I hired a gynecologist in America to view it and just to get a different viewpoint. And the specialist I was working with looked over it as well. So it was 3 pairs of eyes. And it was amazing what you can do.
Yes, it is. It is.
Now, is there any other topic you'd like to cover? Because we've probably been talking for about an hour already.
We have quite a bit. Trying to think. I don't know if you want to use this or not, but I'll tell you 2 things I'm involved with here to see if you're familiar with them. One is Chip Conley's newish venture called Modern Elder Academy.
Yes, I've heard of that.
You know about that?
Yes, I've heard of it, yeah.
You might enjoy it, and some of your clients might, because they have online classes about dealing with life transition. Chip is a successful entrepreneur, made his bones here in San Francisco, but he's got the religion now of what he calls modern elders.
Yes.
Essentially people over 50, and who really, a lot of significant things happen to people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and even 80s. But these things are not culturally acknowledged, right? You could be an empty nester. You could be going through a divorce. Your parents could be ill or gone, and you were their caretaker. Your children may have left, right? You may be out of a job or looking to do something different, even if you have a choice about it. In other words, it's a huge period of change all these years. So he has now established a couple of physical world places where people can go and take workshops and bond with similar people in Baja in Mexico and in Santa Fe in New Mexico in the U.S. But say the online courses and his books, and he's a super productive blogger. So his material appears every day on LinkedIn and on his blog. It's the same post, but it goes out widely. So it's an interesting, I went very early when he was first launching the place. So it's been 5 years since I've been to a formal week-long workshop, and that's kind of beat it they do. So that's one. And more recently, I'm just keeping an eye on something. I was introduced to a friend of a friend who has a new startup here called openwater.group. And it's meant to be a membership club with chapters focused over 50. So in this case, it's meet people in person, have an online community to connect about new business ideas, consulting, life itself, but more a focus of who's doing interesting entrepreneurial things and that sort of thing. We have to see if this is going to be successful, because I know it's very hard to launch something when there's not quite enough people in the community to do it. And they're trying. In fact, I'm going to a cocktail event next week in San Francisco to talk about networking to a group of members and prospects. And so I'm happy to help them.
Yep.
And I'm curious to see how this sort of thing goes. But the point is there's more and more people paying attention to over 50.
Yeah, I find that interesting. As I look back, 50 is so young. A lot of people get to 50 and they think they're old, and I'm thinking, no, it's so
I agree.
young.
I agree.
That's
There's
why,
so much left.
Yeah, and I think most of the 50-year-olds are going to be quite digital by now, because you're a little bit older than me, but not a lot. But in our households, when we were younger, I think you might have had colour TVs, but I think we had a black and white, and I can't even remember if we had a phone in the house. And we spent most of the time outdoors.
Yeah, I was bookish, so I spent time indoors reading, but it was reading books that were
real books.
Physical.
Yeah, no, it was the same with me.
Yeah.
I read a lot of books when I was younger.
Yeah.
But I remember when I went to high school, I went round to one of my friends' place who later became a doctor, and I was stunned at how many books he had on his bookshelf. I thought, wow, I thought I read a lot. Gee, he read 10 times what I read, and maybe that's why he became a doctor. Yeah, so I think the fact that there are more people over 50, 60, 70, 80 and older alive today.
And in better shape, statistically anyway, I think.
Yeah, and
more
living
live longer. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I bring on people to talk about longevity is we want to keep our cognitive ability. We want to be able to think and still do stuff that we find interesting. And mainly I'm aimed at professionals, is to be able to keep thinking, to be able to read, to think about what we do, and maybe do something, maybe earn a little bit of money from expertise.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Karen. How would you like people to connect with you, Karen?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I am there. I would encourage everyone, not just for my purpose, not just for me, but don't just use canned LinkedIn language when you're reaching out to a stranger, right? Because that doesn't give us any incentive to say, oh, of course we should be connected. I'd like to know more about you. So be sure and say a reason that has some relevance and focus for that person that you're asking. Otherwise, we could communicate without having that connection on LinkedIn. Still do that. But anyway, LinkedIn is a way. I do have a website that is just my name, KarenWickre.com, where there's some things I've written and about the book and that sort of thing.
Now, we should mention the book. It's still for sale as a Kindle version and a physical book as well. Where can they get that from?
The biggest, easiest place probably is our favorite global retailer, Amazon. I encourage people to find it another way. They're independent booksellers and at bookstores. It can be ordered through bookstores too. It just depends if you have a need for instant gratification.
Yeah, I've got to say, I find Amazon amazing. I can have stuff delivered the next day.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, how do they do it? And that's changed the nature of commerce, because there are a couple of businesses out there who will deliver the next day. Because Amazon set the standard. So my wife bought something online the other day. It said it was delivered. She only received one package the other day, but she didn't receive the second package. So she's had no communication. Whereas if I get something from Amazon and it's the wrong size or it's not what I want, I can take it back to the post office, which is just up the road. And it's all organised and refunded. I'm thinking, wow, we've got a lot to learn.
It's just a more logistics operation than we can comprehend.
Yeah, they're pretty smart, I think. But it teaches us you've got to be able to think differently about business today. Before you go, I should ask you, what's the name of your dog?
So my new dog's name is Franny. I'm calling her Franny Fran or Franita as nicknames that she's already earned. She's a 4.5-year-old Staffordshire Terrier mix. There's a lot of those in the Bay Area. And she's very sweet and very calm and medium energy, which is perfect for me.
That's right. She's been talking to us during the program, so I thought we'd better find out a little bit about it.
Yes.
So, Karen, thank you very much for being my guest again, 50 episodes later.
So happy to.
Thank you for listening to the Wisepreneurs podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please consider subscribing to the podcast, and if you're feeling generous, buy me a cup of coffee to keep me going. Thank you.